Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. I told you in the previous segment that we were going to talk about some of the best and worst moments, matches, and overall WrestleManias. Usually we start off with the best. Here I'd like to get the negativity out of the way because WrestleMania is a subject that we should all have fun with. We haven't recently, but we should all have fun with. So let's get the worst out of the way, and we were going to talk about some of the worst WrestleMania matches. What were some of them, Chris?
Brock and Goldberg, WrestleMania
Obvious
20.
number. Yeah.
Talk about screwing up a dream match.
Yeah.
The two great big men wrestlers who go out there and just don't care because it's their last night in the company.
The thing is, people are probably going to comment or think that they're going to mention the crowd. Because, like you said, it's the reverse Hogan Rock, where no one liked anything. Take the crowd out of the scenario altogether. The match still sucks. Forget the fact that they didn't even react to the crowd at all. This looked like typical, written from beginning to end WWE big man bullshit. When I think of Goldberg Brock, and they knew that it was a dream match everyone wanted to see, which is why they set it up months beforehand, I don't want to see them do like shoulder block and no one moves and tie up and no one moves. I want to see backflips and shooting stars and all the cool stuff we know they could do.
The thing about Goldberg Brock is that they didn't wrestle like typical big men. They were quick, they're agile, they moved like they were 170 pounds. So we wanted to see that, and we didn't. Two more big men, Akebono and Big Show. They never have anything to do with Big Show at WrestleMania. So they put him in a fucking sumo match, and people didn't get it. It was just bad.
The smart marks got it who knew who Akebono was.
Nah.
Japanese, it must be great.
Undertaker and Big Bossman
The Hell in a Cell.
in the Hell on my television. They always like list Undertaker's opponents and they'd say like Undertaker and Flair and then Bundy because they like Bundy for whatever reason. And they never mention that. And they always refer to the Undertaker Big Show Albert match as Undertaker and Big Show. That was brutal.
Now, I know some of the earlier WrestleManias, on the undercard, there's going to be some stuff that's not that spectacular, like if it's a throwaway Hercules match or whatever. I don't want to harp on that. It was probably passable. Adrian Adonis and Uncle Elmer was a hell of a lot fucking worse.
It was a completely different time back then, though.
That
was like the only pay-per-view or one of, very
The commentary for Adrian Adonis Uncle Elmer is really funny, though.
Well, what wasn't funny was probably the worst title match at WrestleMania. Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle versus Randy Orton.
Yeah.
A sad, pathetic disaster of epic proportions.
Middle of the show and the wrong guy gets pinned.
It was just, for some reason, Rey Mysterio was getting heat, and then he messed up the 619 of the ring post, and it was fucking 9 minutes long.
Short, sloppy,
and
that wasn't my day. Everybody knew Mysterio was only getting the belt because Eddie Guerrero died.
Right.
I don't know if the fans booing him were out of resentment for that, but it really should have just been one-on-one.
Oh, yeah. Man, it would have been a hell of a lot better.
How many great matches have Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio had together, and then you throw Orton in there?
Gimmick Battle Royal. Just the idea of doing that.
The only thing that sucked about that was it was called gimmicks.
Gimmicks,
yeah. The idea,
that was just great seeing all these guys and having Gene Okerlund and Bobby Heenan.
It's weird how like sometimes the legends are a big joke and then sometimes the legends are really cool and then you got Michael Hayes running out in a t-shirt with his gut hanging out. Bad Street. I love seeing like Gene Okerlund and Bobby Heenan and I love seeing the old timers, but I'd rather the Hall of Fame thing than that kind of stuff.
I just don't like breaking kayfabe. That's just
the gimmick battle.
But when it comes to main events, the name that kept popping up in my mind is Triple H. Now, I don't want to say Jericho Triple H was bad, because the match itself was okay. It was placed in the absolute wrong part of the card, but Triple H needs to show how big his penis is, and he thinks it's bigger than Hulk Hogan's body. His comeback was not more important than Hogan's, and that's a sad fact that he tried putting off to the side, didn't fucking work.
Before he jobbed the belt to him the next month.
Not to mention the fact that the focus was on Stephanie and Lucy the dog and all that shit. But
when you see a Hogan and The Rock on the side of a bus, and then you order the show and Triple H is closing it, there's something wrong.
The match was okay. It wasn't the worst at all. I think that would be the four-way at WrestleMania 2000.
How much did they screw up?
Jesus.
That was kind of like what 25 is now. It's like you've got so many things you can do. Foley retired, but then came back. So you just brought the guy out of retirement so he can have his big WrestleMania moment and subsequent title win.
And do
he
we
doesn't
really
win.
need to see Evan McMahon and
that was in everyone's corner having the heel win.
The focus was on the fucking McMahons. Foley was so out of shape, he almost broke his fucking sternum doing that table spot, and the heel won. Was there anything good in that goddamn match? Rock bottoming Stephanie is not going to make up for the fact that
it was so great that I fell asleep during the match.
What about moments? what were some of the worst WrestleMania moments?
Triple H, Booker T.
I think that would be number fucking one.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to keep mentioning it on the show, but it really was the worst thing I've ever seen. You remember I flipped.
Yeah.
They put not just racism, but the fact that he was a WCW guy. They put all this on his back. He's carrying the load for Bobo Brazil and Ernie Ladd and all the guys who never made it, and he fucking loses.
Pretty much clean.
Not just loses, to the pedigree, and then he gets pinned like 45 seconds later.
Brock missing the shooting star press. It was not only very disappointing that he fucked up, but scary and took away from a good match.
Took away, to put it lightly, the entire balance of that match rested on one move. Either he hits it and it's a classic, or he fucks it up. The entire work before that is undone, and the match is reduced to a highlight of him fucking it up.
Austin giving Donald Trump one of the worst fucking stunners I've ever seen. First of all, Donald Trump is not an athlete. The stunner was horrible, especially on a match where everyone's watching, should have been on the highlight reel. It was fucked up, and to me, I thought it was fucking horrible.
I think Flair wrestling a dark match is pretty embarrassing. Not that we ever saw it unless you were in the arena or on DVD. Okerlund and Heenan being caught in the closet with Mae Young and Moolah.
The comedy acts are always horrible. Like when they had everybody come out and dance. Remember, like Ricky Steamboat and like
that was
Ron
the best
Simmons.
moment of that WrestleMania.
It was like everybody in the backstage dancing together. Like why? You couldn't have Flair on the show, but you have time for this garbage.
Speaking of garbage, overall, what's the worst WrestleMania?
2000. Whose bright idea was it to have an entire WrestleMania with no one-on-one matches?
There was. It was the Cat and
the
Terry
women's
Runnels.
match.
15, it had attitude written all over it, and coming, especially off a great WrestleMania like 14, 15 was just the start of the downfall.
D'Lo Brown and Test winning a Battle Royal to get a title shot. Pure Russo.
That was brutal Russo.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 11. I just never liked that show. It was a weird celebrity. I mean, the Taylor stuff was cool, but maybe it was the Diesel stuff. Just the fact that they were still running with this guy.
He was a 7-foot Hogan, and everyone wanted Michaels
he's
to win.
defending against a heel that everybody really wants to win, and they have like forced celebrity involvement. John Turturro's little brother on NYPD Blue or whatever announcing, and
Jonathan Taylor Thomas
playing
chess.
I hate WrestleMania 19. The more I thought about it, Mysterio loses in the opener in the Cruiserweight title match to Matt Hardy. Brock fucks up the shooting star. Triple H pins Booker T. And when you have two NCAA wrestlers, legit wrestlers, in the main event of your biggest show, and the poster is Hogan McMahon.
20 years in the making.
Yeah. But WrestleMania 2000 did suck. 16 is what it should have been called. But we're going to move on to some of the best and be a little more positive when we come back.
Surprised no one went to 9.
I like 9.
I like 9. Come on. What about Hogan Sid? I think that's the worst main event ever. That robbed us of Flair versus Hogan.
Just the fact that they didn't do Flair versus Hogan.
Well, and Flair versus Savage was like one of my favorite title matches ever, and I should have closed the show. Yeah. So that just made it even worse. Fuck Sid. That dude's terrible. I know you like him.
I like Sid.
That's not even the worst Hogan main event.
No, it's not, but it was bad.
I think one of the worst matches was Taker and Kane at WrestleMania 20.
Oh, that was
terrible. It's like Big Papa, and it's like ding ding
Main
ding.
event WrestleManias?
Yeah, him and Yokozuna. Terrible.
Okay.
No argument there. The Cruiserweight fucking gauntlet was pretty bad. You know what's funny? The more I thought about 20, the more it sucked.
Yeah, especially now.
Forget Benoit. Outside the main event.
Acclaimed by reviewers and film festivals around the world, it is one of the great documentary films of our time. Now, the 10th anniversary collector's edition of Hitman Hart, Wrestling with Shadows. The story of the epic real-life battle between Bret Hart and Vince McMahon. And as a special offer never before released on DVD, the life and death of Owen Hart. Exclusively available on this double DVD 10th anniversary collector's edition. The life and death of Owen Hart. The story of a real-life tragedy in a world where making money trumps everything.
Vince McMahon has always had this mentality about treating wrestlers like circus animals.
You never dreamed something like that could happen in wrestling.
Order the 10th anniversary collector's edition of Hitman Hart, Wrestling with Shadows, and the life and death of Owen Hart. And you will also receive 2 added features. A new interview with Bret Hart, looking back 10 years later, and an interview with the film's director, Paul J. Order this double DVD set now for only $24.95. Order now online or by phone at 866-396-4231. $24.95 plus shipping and handling. Order now.
Enough bitching and complaining. We're going to move on to some of our warm memories of WrestleMania because we're positive people, isn't that right? We're going to talk about some of the best WrestleMania moments, matches, and overall shows. Joining us on our panel is Brett Simonello. And starting off, what were some of the best WrestleMania matches? You've got a lot to choose from.
WrestleMania 4, which had the tournament of matches, which culminated in Macho Man and Ted DiBiase. Macho Man winning the title. It's one of my favorite WrestleMania main events.
My favorite part about that is Hogan getting in on the shot of Savage holding up Lesnar with the belt. And Hogan's like, look at this, I did this.
Yes. And I will take it away too.
I fixed them up.
He did too, like, look at this.
Hogan and Rock at WrestleMania 18. If there was a match where the crowd was hot from beginning to end, and it was just done so perfectly, and Rock did a great job of switching to play the heel.
Oh, yes.
And just the whole dynamics of these two guys finally facing each other and living up to the hype made for a perfect WrestleMania match.
Have we ever marked out more watching a WrestleMania?
Oh, man.
No. That was the last time I think I stood up for WrestleMania.
That's one of the matches you could watch forever, isn't it?
Yeah, you can watch it over and over again.
And it was a retread in the same building as Hogan Warrior in a way, which was my first WrestleMania, April 1st, 1990, my first pay-per-view I ever ordered, and it was for that match. It lived up to the hype. I don't care what people say about their work rate and all that bullshit. It was well-structured. It was great drama. It was actually 50-50, not the bullshit Jim Ross was trying to tell us about the split crowd at WrestleMania 18. It was literally your one side or the other. Not just in the arena, but in your neighborhood.
Yeah. And chose sides.
I was a Hogan fan. I guess I was kind of sad, but Warrior was kind of cool, so it was all right.
Bret and Piper at WrestleMania 18.
Piper's best match.
The build, and that's one thing I liked about it is Piper knew the role he needed to play in that match because people always bitch about Piper not being a great worker and all that, but that was a great story.
It's full of emotion.
The promo right before, would have had you.
Yeah,
that was excellent.
It was great build-up. Piper was in good shape, and it did what it had to do. He put over the new star.
And Piper's promos, as you know, I mean the match itself, obviously, but the way he made himself seem like he was going to be the heel. And hitting him with the bell.
That was class. He had the bell up.
Yeah, and of course, right, the Intercontinental title. Yeah.
One thing you might notice about WrestleMania 8 is the undercard is full of the previous star putting over the younger guy. Undertaker beating Jake the Snake. Bret Hart beating Piper. El Matador losing to Shawn Michaels. Blah, blah, blah. They were actually building somebody up using those names. Be nice if they tried that now. But I'm going to move on to my grandmother's favorite match, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart in the opener of WrestleMania. I don't think there's ever going to be a better opener, maybe on any show ever, but certainly not on WrestleMania. That was one of the best executed matches I've ever seen.
And Owen winning too, which nobody saw coming.
Yeah. The rematch from a year later, Yokozuna and Bret at the end of the night, Bret getting his revenge and getting the belt back, set up earlier in the night the Owen Hart feud for down the line with the belt. Perfectly done, but we do have to mention Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. Now, we were talking about the road to WrestleMania and how sad it is that since they've brought back the Intercontinental belt in 2003, there hasn't been a title match at all at WrestleMania. I was watching an old intro to a show when Gorilla Monsoon said, there's going to be 2 big title matches, and I'm so indoctrinated to think big gold belts. He was talking about the Intercontinental title, believe it or not.
Man,
that's your number 2 guy in the company.
Foreign language now.
That ended up being one of the matches that you can watch to this day, and it's still a classic. Literally total nonstop action. For the Attitude Era, not an era known for wrestling, but a lot of people like to talk about WrestleMania 17, and the culmination was Rock and Austin. And I've never been a big fan of their series, especially at WrestleMania, but that match was a great match.
But the finish tarnished it for me so much.
Yeah, it did.
To do an angle like that nobody wanted to see, such a force with all the other great stuff they had going on, potentially with the invasion and everything, and finally getting their Hogan Warrior for their Attitude Era and blowing it by doing that in Texas. Oh, man.
It was horrible.
They haven't recovered from that since.
They really haven't. It was a really good match.
It was great.
Austin bringing back the $1 Million Dream. I'm missing back to Bret and Austin's matches, bringing in elements of that. And with the McMahon stuff, even with a forced heel, people are still cheering. It's like they were ignoring everything that McMahon was doing.
What would you expect to happen to a half-black man in Texas against the biggest star in the company? But you did mention the $1 Million Dream, which harkens back to WrestleMania 13, and one of the best WWF matches ever, Bret and Austin. Now, as much as I rip on the creative and McMahon and the company or whatever, there is a case where the storytelling was off the charts. Not to even mention
you can't duplicate that anymore.
Not even to mention the added element of Shamrock, who hadn't wrestled yet as the special referee. But everyone's tried doing the double, well, WCW especially, tried doing the double turn after that. Never quite worked, did it?
No. Bret and Austin, the chemistry that these two had in the ring was incredible. And the way that Bret sold the suplex they took from Shamrock and not going into a brawl that they would do nowadays, and then with Austin getting up on his own and never actually quitting, it was just great drama, great story told.
They do come up with a lot of great visuals, like the famous shot of the blood from a stone, the Austin bleeding and passing out because he's so tough. But that could qualify as a great WrestleMania moment. What were some of the great WrestleMania moments?
Going back to WrestleMania 6 again, which has to be one of my favorites.
Hercules and Earthquake.
Close, it's almost there. The match with Demolition and the Classic Connection. Not necessarily the match, but the aftermath of the match involved, because Andre the Giant didn't get in the ring once. Haku fought the whole match, and they lost to Demolition. Heenan gets in the ring, little Heenan, Andre the Giant, verbally abusing him. Andre's sitting there taking it, and boom, smacks him. Andre wakes up. Oh, yeah, I'm a giant. He grabs him, he paintbrushes him. Then my favorite part, he gets back on this little trolley, and he pushes Haku and Heenan off it, and he rides out into the sunset all by himself.
The little weasel finally gets his
It was great. I loved it.
The trolleys were great. Heenan after WrestleMania 3.
Speaking of WrestleMania 3, we would have to mention Hogan body slamming.
How could he not?
Unbelievably huge.
That was the culmination of the golden era of wrestling.
The biggest thing ever. There's nothing bigger than the biggest star ever, slamming the biggest wrestler ever, previously the biggest star ever, the biggest show ever.
If wrestling had a little MLB or NBA moment,
that would be the
symbol.
That would be the logo.
But you don't think Kane doing that to Khali was close?
Well, clearly everybody knows that.
The celebration of Bret Hart winning at WrestleMania 10. In the garden, all the faces coming out, put him up on his shoulders. It was just one of those moments where you're proud to be a wrestling fan.
A moment where your jaw dropped had to have been at the end of WrestleMania 8 when Warrior came back.
Oh, that was so cool.
Never forget the look on my face.
Also the match Savage Warrior, but the aftermath of that match.
Wow.
First of all, there was
emotion.
There was months of build to us. And what was great about this feud in particular was that it didn't involve the belt. It was more important than the belt. Their hatred went deeper than that. And then the match structure as well was also very good, with Savage hitting like 7, 8 elbows. Still couldn't do it. And then Warrior comes back, does something similar with the shoulder blocks, destroys Savage, pins him. It's over. Of course, he didn't retire, as nobody does, but for that time period, it worked because they brought Miss Elizabeth back full circle. And what a great moment. Just the whole segment.
The only moment in WrestleMania history for me on par emotionally with that was when Michael said, "I'm sorry, I love you," and beat Flair. And I hate to be negative, but they've dropped the ball on so many things. We've all listed like the common things from WrestleMania 3 and Savage Warrior and the WrestleMania 10 stuff. Look at the Cena era. Has Cena really had a moment? I mean, he tapped out Triple H and Michaels in back-to-back years, but they would never make a big deal out of it. Like, he tapped out the click guy. Because they can't, because that's like a shoot thing, that he beat both click guys.
Wasn't that special.
But real, and even Undertaker, yes, he has a streak, but what's his moment?
WrestleMania 20 entrance, that's the only thing.
An entrance.
Exactly. It's sad because she's won the belt back-to-back WrestleManias, and still none of them are
nobody.
I like back before. And sets are fine, but I like back before people cared more about the matches than the sets, because when it comes to positive praise about the show, the first thing they mention is the fucking set instead of what a cool match that was.
Yeah.
So, what about overall some of the best WrestleManias?
WrestleMania 8 is an extremely underrated show. Now, it is extremely disappointing that Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan did not main event that show. But much like WrestleMania 3, outside of the obvious Hogan-Andre, you had an awesome match in the middle of the show with Flair and Savage for the title, with an awesome finish and a great storyline attached to it, and you had the big moment of Ultimate Warrior returning. And sometimes at WrestleMania, it's like we talk about how great the show is. Outside of WrestleMania 10 and 17, there's really only 2 matches usually that are like really stand out, and then maybe one big moment. That's usually enough to make a great WrestleMania.
WrestleMania 14, I think from top to bottom,
not a bad match.
Not
There's
a bad
no
match.
bad matches on that.
Great heavyweight title match. Great Intercontinental title match with Shamrock and The Rock. The tag team title match was entertaining as well. A lot of aura around it because of Mike Tyson. I think from top to bottom, that was one of the best.
The Undertaker Kane blow-off after a year of build-up was also very good.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 6 was mine, Hogan Warrior. But the undercard had Macho Man and Sherry against Rhodes and Sapphire. Sapphire is always one of my favorites.
That's the moment.
You gotta love it. DiBiase, Rick Rude, Bossman, they were all on the card. And they just, everybody put on a great...
All the early 90s stars.
All my favorite guys.
That was like the culmination of that era.
They were great. I loved them all.
I think in that same category, 7 could fall in there, but that's just me. Most people go towards 17, and that's fine. I like some of those older
The
ones.
blindfold match is highly underrated. I love
fine.
I love that. Is he here?
You need a silly thing.
He's here. All right.
Well, we got to go there. We got to go, and it was fun talking about WrestleMania. Hopefully, because we are shooting this ahead of time, they've set up some better matches, and either way, hopefully they pull through with something, because this may be their last fucking chance.
We can be happy people.
Next time, we're going to talk about some of the best and worst build-up to a match, a program, a feud, and things of that nature. Sometime we'll also be talking about some of the funniest and least funniest moments, and women in wrestling coming up soon, too. So for the panel, Brett Simonello, Sal Randazzo, Chris Harris, Rodney LeConte, Lawrence Haber, I'm your host, Eric Santamaria. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com and get your shirt today.